is the Lenovo Legion Go. Because on September 1st, we're recording this on the 2nd. On September 1st, they officially announced it, and there were some things that changed. So before we get to all of the things that changed, let's just talk about what we now know for in fact about the device. Russ, what's like the top thing that you want to talk about here?
Other than the screen, I like the fact that it's real and that like most of the stuff that we were postulating about is actually going to happen. The biggest surprise for me was the price. Like we had heard it was going to be $799. And I remember thinking, even last week, I'm like, it's going to be hard to justify an additional $100 over the ROG Ally, which is already $50 more than the highest Steam Deck. And so it's just kind of these cascading steps. But now that they've announced it being starting at $699, I'm like, oh, well, now we're talking, It's so I'm pretty excited about it now. It's like that we have a lot of these specs, a lot of improvements in many areas over the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck, and at that same price point.
Yeah, that price point really did surprise me. I was actually at work and I saw like people like talking about the price, like on Twitter, and they were like, "Oh, it's $699," because I looked in my lunch break, or they said what the price was, and my immediate reaction was, oh, okay, well, that's probably for the Z1 chip, not for the Z1 Extreme chip, but that's not true. It turns out that it's $700 for the Z1 Extreme chip with the RAM that is faster than the ROG Ally. So this should be more performant than the ROG Ally. And for only $50 more, you end up getting a terabyte SSD in there instead of a half a terabyte. So it's $750 or $749.99, whatever. If you want to get a terabyte SSD, what do you like when you see that? $50 is almost nothing. Like, would you like for me, I don't think I would even consider getting the lower spec one and then opening it up and putting in an SSD because it's only $50 for a terabyte one.
Right. I mean, just buying a terabyte hard drive will cost you between $75 and $100 if you get a decent one. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like at that point, yeah, I'd rather just have Lenovo do it, And so, yeah, for me, $50 makes a lot of sense to have that upgrade. It's a really good deal, honestly, to get that much storage. I mean, obviously, there's still a micro SD card slot. You can always go down that route as well. But yeah, if I was just to buy this off the market, yeah, I'd totally buy the 751.
Yeah, same with me. It's only $50 for that extra storage. Let's move on and talk about the controls because I mean, they didn't give us much more information in their actual like press release, but Dave 2D has one in hand, and he made a video where he was talking about how the controls work, and he said that his is a prototype and that things are actually going to change when the real one comes out. And one of the things that he's talked about is like it comes with, first off, it comes with a case. ROG Ally does not come with a case. I don't know that that's a big deal, but that's just something to keep in mind. And in that case, there's a spot in the bottom for that weird little hockey puck thing that we talked about last time. And it's got basically a hole that your right Joy-Con snaps into. And the one that when it releases, apparently it's going to be magnetic. So when you put it in there and it magnetizes, it's then going to automatically switch over to what they're calling FPS mode. And I think that is really compelling. Now, for me, I'm not super excited about like that mousing stuff. I think it's cool, but at the same time, like I don't know that I will sit down, get out that kickstand and play like that. Do you think that you are going to like sit down, get out the kickstand, pop off the Joy-Cons, put that thing in mouse mode and play at a desk like that?
Absolutely not. I mean, I feel like that's going to be for the people who buy gaming laptops and they don't want to have a gaming laptop. Like I feel like that's that audience, and that's not me. I see that and I think, oh, great, that's a very easy to use like configuration mouse mode. Like when I need to set something in an emulator, like that's what I see it as. And so, I do see the value in that. I mean, like, just thinking about like the GPD Win 4, which had a little mouse nub on it, that opened up a whole world in terms of just extra controls and feel. I know a lot of these handhelds have the ability to use like an analog stick as a mouse. It never works that well. And obviously the Steam Deck has those trackpads, and this one will too. But yeah, I like the idea of having an ability to just jump and use a mouse. You know, with my ROG Ally, I often will just pair it with a Bluetooth mouse to have on hand if I need to go into the settings or do anything else like that. And so this just removes that requirement. And it's just a nice bonus feature for me to have on a handheld that I'm going to be playing in handheld mode.
Yeah, most of the time I have my Logitech MX Master 3 mouse, and if you push a button on the bottom of it, it swaps between different devices. So on this one, 3 is my Mac, so it connects to my Mac. 1 connects to my Windows machine over there, and then 2 is currently set up to connect to my ROG Ally, so that anytime that I want to use a mouse with the ROG Ally, it's easy to do. All I got to do is like hit that button and then wait for the Bluetooth to do its little negotiation thing. And then I just usually just sit there wiggling the mouse for a while. And then it's like, hey, I'm awake now. And it works. And oh, you've got the same one.
I have the same one.
Yeah, it's a great
I do
mouse.
the same thing. For me, it's always, though, you know, I have one for my Mac, one for my Windows, and it's always the third one is which device am I going to pair it with, like right now? You know what I mean? And now I don't have to worry about that with the Lenovo. I can just, you know, use its own mouse, which is great.
Yeah, but then something occurred to me as I was thinking about this device all week, looking forward to Friday for when it was going to get announced. It was like I kept thinking about the detachable controllers. And the left controller is very compelling to me because what I would love to do is I'll probably end up getting this device anyway because I want to make a video about it, or 2 or 3 videos. I want to be able to talk about it. But if I could just get the controllers, I would love to be able to pair those controllers to my PC and then sit there because I don't do WASD because it hurts because I broke my elbow years ago, and it still hurts to like sit with WASD for a long period of time. So I would love to have just that left controller for WASD. I think that that's really cool. Anything? Yeah, you know, go ahead.
I was thinking about you the other day because I reviewed this little controller here. This is like that little 8BitDo Pro or Micro.
I loved this thumbnail, by the way.
Oh, thanks. This keyboard, this has a keyboard function, so you could set this to WASD. Right. And then just like because you were talking about Baldur's Gate 3 and how you lean back while you're playing, you know, and so you could have this in your other hand just kind of moving around. Like you can even set it up to macros basically and be like, hey, this will be like whatever macro function you need without having to hunch over the keyboard. And so I think the Lenovo would work similar in that regard. And so, yeah, there's some pretty neat ideas with both this and with the Lenovo in terms of just having an additional like body position while you're gaming.
Yeah. So at the beginning of this, you said, well, except for the screen. So let's talk about the screen, because the leaked information that we had, the leaked information had stuff on there saying that it was a VRR screen. And not just that, it was even in like the video where I believe it said like all of the information on the video, the leaked video. And then when the official stuff got announced, that is not the case. It is. I don't think it's a variable refresh rate screen. If you go to their press release and read through their press release, they do say that it has its lowest refresh rate is 60 hertz. And its highest refresh rate is 144 hertz. But they don't mention variable refresh rate. And this morning, I was watching a video from Techspert, I think is the name of the channel. I'd never seen them before, but you know, they're like 1 million subs, so clearly they're a big channel. And they had their hands on this thing, and they were showing that it's basically a switch. Like you go into the software and you tap a button, and it brings up the refresh rate, and you can say, "Oh, I want this to be a 60 hertz game, or I want this to be 144 hertz, kind of like how the Steam Deck does it. Now, when this thing got announced, and you and I were talking about this, one of the things that you had said is you were excited for it to be this variable refresh rate that goes up to 144 hertz. Is this a deal breaker for you?
It definitely dampens my enthusiasm for it. I haven't been contacted by Lenovo, so I'm assuming I'm going to have to buy the thing. And after seeing that, I'm like, sure, I'll make it for my channel, but I don't know. I don't think I would buy it at this point. I've already used a device that had a high refresh rate. 120 hertz was the One X Fly. Now the review unit they sent actually only had 60 hertz as a whole thing there. But anyway, they're not having variable refresh rate on a 120 hertz display, and to me, it feels basically useless. It's just a gimmick to put in marketing, or if you want to play an indie game that will run at 120 hertz, and there's going to be very few of those that might enhance that experience. That's like the only value I can see in it. I don't think that a lot of the competitive FPSs are going to run at 144 hertz on this chipset very well. So I'm not even sure, unless you're really kicking down the settings, if it's going to be worth it. There's going to be a moment where you're like, I'm so glad I have over 60 hertz going on right now. I'm just not really sure, at least from my perspective, if it's going to be a value.
Yeah, and it's funny. Its lowest is 60 hertz. That's disappointing to me, because that means it doesn't go all the way down to, say, 40 hertz or something like that. Because if it was if we had the ability to have it at 40 hertz, like the Steam Deck, then if a game can't quite maintain 60 hertz, then I can set the game to lock the frame rate at 40 hertz and then lock the refresh rate of the screen at 40 hertz, and it's going to feel really smooth. Obviously not as smooth as if it were 60 hertz or higher, but it will feel better than when it's, kind of bouncing around a little bit. And so it is very disappointing that it's not a variable refresh rate screen, but it's also disappointing that it doesn't go below 60 hertz. But I also think that if I remember,
there'll probably be.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, there's probably going to be third-party tools that will probably, there's a custom resolution utility app that allows you, even if the manufacturer hasn't set it up that way, that you can sometimes set a 40 hertz display with some of these panels. And given that it goes all the way to 144, it might be something that's configurable, just something that they haven't put in their software, at least not yet. Yeah, but you're right. The sweet spot is being able to play it at a lower resolution or lower refresh rate, like with the ROG Ally. It goes down to 48 hertz with that VRR, and that is a wonderful experience. To me, 144 VRR, the VRR is way more important than the 144.
Yeah, I feel like they're leaning into this mindset that a lot of gamers have, that bigger number better. Well, this is 120, but this one's 144. So clearly it is superior. Well, okay, sure, it will hit higher frame rates, but the times that you're actually going to get that are very, very few and far between, and you would way more get a better experience, or at least be able to benefit from the stats if it was a variable refresh rate screen. If it were, then obviously they would have said it. Why was it in the previous, why was it in the leaked stuff and it's not in this? Do you think that has anything to do with like they changed their mind, or do you think it's more along the lines of somebody just didn't know what they were talking about? Like whoever's in charge of making that video was like, oh, 144 and 60, that sounds very like variable refresh rate. I guess it's variable refresh rate. And they put that in there. And then somebody's like, oh, no, that's not what that means. You better take that out. What do you think, Russ?
I mean, tinfoil hat on, I almost feel like maybe those leaks, they leaked, whatever, right? Maybe $799 with VRR was what they were targeting, and people were like, it's too expensive. And they're like, well, how can we cut costs? And so maybe they sourced a different panel that doesn't have VRR. That's the only thing I can think of, maybe, is that they did that to be able to lower it down an additional $100. I'm not really sure. The other thing about it is I saw a lot of comments being like, well, my phone's got 144 hertz and it's so buttery smooth to go through the menus and stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, great, you're not going to buy a handheld PC so that you can have buttery smooth menus. Like
Right.
that's not really a factor when it comes to something made for gaming. You got to think about what games you can play on it. And so, yeah, just all around, I'm just kind of bummed about it. And yeah, I'm not really sure why they did that, but that's my guess, is that they probably wanted to drop down that price even more. And that's where they cut the corner.
Well, one place that they didn't cut the corner, I had some confusion about this until I watched the Techspert video, and I'll make sure that I put a link in the description for this if I can find that video again. But they talked about TDP. So if you look at the press release from Lenovo. The press release from Lenovo basically says that it runs at a TGP. They don't say TDP, and I looked at my keyboard, and those are not like next to each other. All right. So it runs at a TGP of 30 watts. And I saw that and I was like, oh, I'm not sure what they mean by that, because the ROG Ally runs at a TDP of 35 watts. And so like I was kind of, we were in our private Discord, me and one of the other guys, we were kind of talking back and forth about, well, how do you translate TGP to TDP? What does it really mean? But then in the Techspert video, they said this, like you get to set the custom TDP in the software, the Legion software, and it has up to a 48 watt TDP, which is much higher than the ROG Ally. So you are running that chip at a much higher TDP, meaning if you dock this thing, which by the way, I love that it has 2 USB-C ports. If you dock this thing to your TV and have it on custom, first off, it's going to have power bypass, so it's not going to overheat your system. It's not going to wear out the battery. And then boost that thing up to 48 watt TDP. You're going to have some really performant games on your screen. And then you just take that system, undock it, take it with you, and lower the TDP. That's really cool. What do you like? Yeah. Am I overstating that, Russ?
No, exactly it. So there are many PCs that use the 7840HS chip, which is very similar to 7840U, and those can be clocked up to like 50, sometimes 60 watts. And the performance on those is exceptional. I've done a couple of videos on them from Minis Forum and B-Link, and they're to that point where I'm like, I don't think I need a PC with a GPU with this thing. I mean, I'm going to make some compromises here and there, but it's to the point where I'm just like, this is so satisfying as it is right now. And so if you're going to able to get a similar experience with this without having to get an external GPU, all that other kind of stuff, that might work out really well, especially with like just from like a creature comfort kind of standpoint, the detachable controllers, if those are comfortable to be able to just grab and pull off, can you imagine? Plug this in your TV in the living room, grab your controllers like a Nintendo Switch, and just start playing. And like none of the Bluetooth, none of that other kind of stuff. If they make a little attachment thing between the two, you have your own controller. God, that might be a winning combination right there.
Yeah, one of my biggest complaints about the Steam Deck is the fact that when you dock it, you suddenly lose all of the cool things that you can do because you have the trackpads and those back buttons. And then you have to, you grab like your Xbox controller or whatever, and the inputs aren't the same. So with this, you've got the same inputs that you have when you are holding the controllers in your hand and when you are holding the system in your hand. I think that is really compelling. And the fact that it has 2 USB-C ports means you can charge it and plug it in without having to buy any of these extra docks. All you got to have is an HDMI to USB-C converter and the charger that it comes with, and you are off to the races. Like this is really, really good. The only thing that you're going to have to buy is probably a third party, one of those little things to put the controls in between them. But I also do really like one of the things I really liked about the Switch is having my hands separated. Like it is comfortable to sit there with your hands separated instead of having them next to each other when you're playing a game on your Switch. Having them separated is really good. Speaking of,
my kids
go
play
ahead.
Like that. I was gonna say my kids play like that where they don't even, I have that little attachment thing. I'm like, why don't you guys use that? And they're like, no. And they're just like, going like this with their hands and they love it. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Well, not only that, but these are much beefier controllers in your hand. Like they're much, much bigger. The Switch ones are very, very small and thin. And so if you have like larger hands, they aren't comfortable for a long period of time. I like having my hands separated, but I would prefer them to be bigger. And the ones from the Legion Go look much more rounded, so you can get your hands around them, very much like the back of the Steam Deck. In fact, Dave 2D's video, he talked extensively about how comfortable it was to play those things. He focused more on, you know, the weird mouse thing that I'm not as excited about, but being able to take them off and sit on the couch and then put them back on and take my device with me, that is compelling, especially when you've got that big screen.
One of the things that, you know, I play my ROG Ally a lot, hooked up like to my external GPU. And one of the things that annoys me is that some games will still think that the controls on the device itself are the primary. And so even if I have a Bluetooth controller hooked up, it won't even register. And so I have to go onto the ROG Ally, go into the settings and turn the controller off. I love the fact they have that button. Like, it's great that you can do that. But you won't have to do that with this one at all. It'll be the same controls, which is great.
It is. And it's really good. Now let's talk about the controls a little bit more. So the button on the top right, I think it's called the Legion R button. That one is the one that activates your like quick access menu or your command center, whatever it is that they want to call it. And that's where you can easily get in there, change your TDP to whatever you want, change your refresh rate to whatever you want. I think that that's really good. I like that they did that stuff. It makes it easy to get to, obviously inspired by the Steam Deck, because, you know, they're the ones that did that first. Let's see, anything else about so we hit the no variable refresh rate and the 48 watt hour or TDP. I feel like last week we kind of undersold the improvement of the battery, because the ROG Ally and the Steam Deck both have a 40 watt hour battery, and this has a 49.2 watt hour battery, which I did a little bit of napkin math, and that's about a 25% increase over what we already had. And I think nobody realized that because it still started with a 4. You know what I mean? They were like, oh, 4. It only went up by 8 or like 9.2 watts. Who cares? But that's actually a pretty big increase. Do you think that that's going to be enough to make up for the fact that this has that massive screen?
Yeah, it's really going to depend on how they can do with power management. You know, I don't know. I still think that we're probably going to get similar battery life to the Steam Deck with this one, even with that larger battery, just because they're, you know, pushing out a lot more pixels. You know, who knows about the amount of volume it takes to just light up that bigger screen. And 144 hertz as well. If you're going to be playing at that higher refresh rate, it's going to eat that battery away. The ROG Ally had a tangibly lower like battery life than the Steam Deck because they were the same, but then there were all those requirements on top of the ROG Ally. So this, I think, will probably just balance things out a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, the ROG Ally, it performs poorly at lower TDPs compared to the APU of the Steam Deck. This uses the same chip, so you're not going to be running this at a 9 TDP watt and still getting the same performance that you do on the Steam Deck. You would actually get better performance on the Steam Deck at the same TDP, but this has a larger battery, so that might not matter. But speaking of the battery, it has this super fast charging, which when I made my video, which if you guys haven't seen my video, make sure that you check it out after this. But when I made my video, I screwed up. I misread the way that it was phrased, and punctuation was very important in that. But essentially, they said that you can go from 0 to 70% when you plug it in, right? But the way that they had written the sentence made it seem to me like while you were gaming, if you plugged it in, you could go from 0 to 70 in a half an hour, which I was like, holy cow, that's really impressive. But the way that it is actually working is if it's dead and you want to charge it, it'll get from 0 to 70 in 30 minutes. By the way, that's awesome. But it also has power bypass so that when you do want to play it while you're plugging it in, it doesn't actually charge the battery at all. So you cannot charge the battery while you're playing, but that's going to be healthier for the battery because it's not going to like drain it at the same, or like charge it and play at the same time. But if it's plugged in, you are just bypassing the battery and skipping it altogether. And I think that that's a really, like, that is a good way to handle it. I was wrong in my video where I talked about that, but I think that this is a very good way to handle it. And if you can go from 0 to 70 in a half an hour, I mean, is it really that big of a deal if it's running low? Like, you can't take a break for a half an hour and plug it in, go like stand up and stretch, and then get back up to 70%. That is pretty crazy to me. Am I wrong to think that that's a really, really fast charge time for a battery that size?
That is great. Yeah. It's pretty fast on the ROG Ally as well, but not that fast. And especially considering it's a larger battery. Yeah, that's going to be a great like quality of life thing, especially if, yeah, like you mentioned, like, okay, you're going to go grab something to eat real quick and you're going to come back to your whatever handheld gaming marathon, then that's going to be a great way to just jump back in and get some battery life. Especially like I'm thinking about like on a plane, you know, like if you're taking this on a plane, there's often times where I'll play for a bit and then I just get to that point where I need to take like a 20-minute nap, you know? And so this would be a great time. Okay, let's charge it up while I take a nap, or maybe move on to read or something else instead. And so, yeah, I can see this being a really beneficial addition too.
And the last thing I think about the Legion Go before we move on to other topics is I want to try and make a comparison between, like, obviously Russ and I don't have our hands on this device yet, but with the information that we have, if you could pick, I mean, because now we have a decision to make. If you could pick this or an ROG Ally, this has a bigger screen. It has 2 USB ports. It has faster RAM. It has those detachable controllers, which look awesome. And I feel like that it's going to be more comfortable to hold, in my opinion. It is heavier, but I like the roundness of the controllers. But then on the other side, you have a variable refresh rate of the ROG Ally. And I know which one I would pick. But I'm curious, which one would you pick, Russ? And everybody who's watching or listening, which one would you guys pick? Let us know in the comments. Go ahead, Russ. What do you think? If you didn't have one already.
Yeah. So I'm trying not to like just buy into the shiny new thing, you know, but I do think that the Lenovo Legion Go just might be a little bit more compelling to me. Like the size and weight are something that I think I'll just acclimate to no matter what. But having all those additional functionalities, that larger screen, bigger battery, like those things are pretty interesting for me. Especially because my major concern with the ROG Ally remains the battery life. Like there's so many times where I look at it and I'm like, I'm about to play and I, pick one of these things to play and I don't pick it because I'm like, I don't even know if the battery's going to last that long, And so, if when I get it in my hands and if it can get like a significantly better battery life experience, then, that probably is going to win it out for me, even more than the VRR, but yeah, we'll see. I do think that I'm leaning more towards the Lenovo, but yeah, definitely need to get it in my hands.
Yeah. And obviously we probably might change our minds once we get our hands on it. We might be like, holy cow, this thing is going to I'm going to get some guns holding this thing up. My forearms are going to be massive because this thing is so heavy. But like you said that you had your wife weigh the Steam Deck plus its case, and it was only 40 grams lighter than the Legion Go, right?
Right. Yeah, it's very, very similar in weight. And that's the one I always grab instead of the ROG Ally because I'm like, oh, at least this one's battery will last longer, And so that says a lot.
Yeah. Bigger number, not always better, everybody. Hey, everybody, if you enjoyed this clip of the Nerd Nest podcast, then there is a link down below that'll take you to the full episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.